Welcome to Harvey Dent's Fact Finder. And today, I want to ask you, do you think that the gold rush was a hoax? A hoax to repopulate an area that had been mud flooded and reset? Yeah, that's right. I'm looking into mud floods and resets because, that's a natural progression. And this California Capitol building really intrigued me. Not only is it surrounded by water as if it's flooded, there's no construction material around it at all whatsoever, but it looks like there's a layer of mud on it. We'll get back to that, and I'll show you what I found on that towards the end. Okay, so the California Gold Rush was basically started when John Sutter found gold on his land when he was building Sutter's Mill. But it's a little known fact that he and his employee kept the secret about the gold for 2 years before the word got out. And I'll have you know, John Sutter was not a very nice man. But next thing you know, they're offering steamship trips to California. Come on, new clipper to San Francisco, California. Come to California, be a part of the gold rush. Get rich, quick. This is supposedly San Francisco in 1846 and 1847, where people were so anxious to go mining for gold that they just parked their ships in right there and just left them. And this is supposedly San Francisco just 2 years later, 1849, 1850. How does all that get built? In 2 to 3 years' time by miners who just migrated from across the country to go mine for gold elsewhere than San Francisco. This picture must have been mistakenly labeled because it said it was 1850 as well, and there's clearly more buildings and more structures in this picture than the previous one. Well, why I think or thought it was a hoax, the gold rush as a hoax, because people were spending their last dollar to make it to California to hunt for this gold. And when they arrived, there was already mining companies set up. They ended up having to go to work for somebody instead of just mining for themselves because they couldn't afford any of the machinery or tools that would be required in order to, be successful in mining. So that's why all the pictures you see of miners are miners in big groups like this, because they were all employed by a mining company, which, Sutter was notorious for being an employer, not at will, basically, in force. So miners like these guys here, trekked all the way across the country to, not make it in mining, so that in 1850 they could build structures like this in San Francisco. Yeah, because people cared about the church that much to build a structure like that in 1850. Here's another picture of the section of the city in 1850. Check out the architecture, all right, the construction. And then this home I'm zooming in on right here, that looks like mud on the backside of it. It looks like there was a wall of mud, a river of mud that just went down the hill and partially covered these buildings. I don't know. Also, you may notice there's never anyone on the streets. I'm sure those two barefooted miners had a hand in constructing something like this. And in the next picture, we're gonna fly from one empty street, look to the right, that's completely empty, to another empty street, which looks like it's about high noon, just by the shadows of the buildings being slightly below the actual structures. So it looks like it's high noon, and there's no one on the streets whatsoever in San Francisco. Have you ever been to San Francisco? There's never no one on the streets. And check out the construction, the architecture. This is 1860, so about 11, maybe 10 years after the gold rush. All this stuff sprang up with all this sophisticated architecture and the street plans. And look at that white building at the top of the hill with the arched windows and the rotunda. And 1860, yeah. Again, another empty street. Check out the architecture, no one on the street. And this could be by the shadows, early afternoon or mid-morning. You can tell the shadows are longer. But again, no one on the street whatsoever with all of these homes around. This is a picture of Union Square. You ever been in Union Square? It's like the shopping district in San Francisco. Yeah, Union Square, these huge buildings, late 1800s, and only one family in the park right there. Do they even look like they belong there? I think they were penciled in later. Here's another example of the masterful architecture and construction skills that those miners brought with them. Yeah, a lot of those older buildings that predated the rush ended up getting burned during the 1906 quake, like that one. And again, here's another very old image. And we're gonna stroll on down the streets of San Francisco where there's never anyone walking. There's never anyone riding or steering a horse carriage. There's never anyone out there playing hopscotch or skip rope. No one walking from work or to home or to the market or anything or anywhere ever. Which again kind of leads me to the question was the gold rush a hoax to get people to come and repopulate this newly vacated area? Which brings me back to the California State Capitol building. Now, what brought my attention on this building was these mud stains that are right there at the first level and the flooding around it. I was like, okay, so how did all this flooding happen? Well, they started construction on the Capitol in 1860, supposedly, and it took them 14 years to complete construction, and there was a flood that went from 1861 to 1862 that they claim was due to an arc storm, an atmospheric river, like a once every however many year occurrence. Well, considering that the latest occurrence was 1861 and 1862, and they didn't break ground on the Capitol building until 1860. But if you look before 1861 and 1862, there was another occurrence in 1810. Now, considering that there was 14 years of construction, and the only image of during construction I can find of the State Capitol building are these that all seem to be at about the same point in construction, except for this one. It shows completed walls, a missing dome, and mud up to the second floor of the building where it looks like they're excavating it. That could not have occurred during the Great Flood. 1861 and 1862 didn't break ground until 1860. There's no way they made that much progress in 2 years considering that there was a flood. So that explains why there was mud up to the first level on this old picture of the State Capitol building, because the State Capitol building was buried in mud from the 1810 event, and they just played it off as though they were constructing it the whole time, just digging it out. And that's why I think the California Gold Rush may have been a hoax, because a lot of the buildings in and around this area predate the history that we are given. Thousands of people with gold fever are not going to stop their hunt for gold to help build a massive church in 1850, and thousands of people are not going to give up their farms, leave their farms, or quit trying to rebuild their homes after a flood in order to contribute to some bogus state capitol building being built. I assume this, as well as all the other wonderfully ornate government buildings that they just assumed control of, were all pre-existing, and they just assumed control of them. Again, these are all just assumptions based on the photographic evidence that I found, but most of the time my assumptions are probably more dead on than the history that they've provided us. Well, if you like what I'm doing here, why don't you go ahead and click that like button. You know you want to like it, subscribe, share, comment, dislike, do something so your brothers and sisters know that you're alive out there, like joining the mud flood search. Until you find your truth, keep looking.